Um, the purpose of today's discussion or panel discussion is more education than anything else. To learn more about the history and evolution of women's lacrosse in Canada, and both the box and field genres. And we'll do it largely through the experiences and stories and histories of four of Canada's foremost female lacrosse personalities. Now, before I introduce our panel officially, uh, I know that a lot of people out there watching and listening to this presentation aren't really up on women's lacrosse. Maybe aren't aware of the history and so forth. So what I'm going to do very briefly, and I stress very briefly, is give a brief overview of the development of women's lacrosse in Canada over the last 40 years. So I'm going to try and cram 40 years into about 5 minutes, so that when you do hear the panelists' experiences and stories and whatnot, uh, you'll have a little more perspective into what they're actually talking about. So here we go, your women's lacrosse history lesson. And just a warning that I haven't fact checked all of this, so there could be the occasional glitch in here. So if we go way back to the late 70s, both Ontario and BC had flourishing box lacrosse leagues, junior and senior box lacrosse leagues. There was a national championship annually, and a place for women to play exclusively box lacrosse. But at that time, there was literally no field lacrosse being played in Canada. Now, this is a very key date. Remember, there could be a quiz. There could be a quiz on this, so take copious notes. In 1981, the Canadian Lacrosse Association made a commitment to the International Federation that they would put a team, Canada would put a team, into the first ever Women's Field Lacrosse World Championship, which was to be held in 1982 in England. Now, one small fly in the ointment was that there was no players, no field players at least. Now, fortunately, and I've got to give a shout out to somebody here, and I hope he's watching this, he probably is, but a gentleman by the name of Paul Gilkinson. He and his family were coaching in Ontario, in the boxing in Ontario. They took their teams down into New York and into the northeastern U.S. and got some familiarity with field lacrosse. And around the same time, around 1979, 80, a group of girls from BC did kind of the same thing, went down to California, got an introduction to field lacrosse, and came back to the box leagues. Well, as it turned out, those two groups got together and became the first ever Team Canada. Played in that 1982 World Championship and actually did very well. I'm sure we'll hear more about that later on. Following the World Cup, field lacrosse really became the go-to sport as far as lacrosse genres went for women. So for the next 15, 20 years, box lacrosse kind of got shunted off to the back burner a bit, and field lacrosse developed across the country, a national championship every year, and representation from at some point during this time, virtually every province in Canada. Now, about 20 years or so, we'll fast forward about 20 years, so we're up to around 1995 or so now. Box lacrosse had a resurgence, both in Ontario and in BC. So as box lacrosse grew, now women had two ways to play lacrosse, both the field lacrosse game and the box lacrosse game. So we're going to fast forward even more up to present time. Let's just pretend there's no COVID to mess everything up. But to present time, well, now in box lacrosse has developed to the extent that there are age group championships, Pee Wee, Bantam, Midget, Junior, for women in box lacrosse. And in field lacrosse, first of all, the game itself has evolved considerably. The rules have changed considerably, and we'll certainly let the panelists talk about that. But it's gone, in my humble opinion, from a kind of a, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of a quirky, very, very sedate kind of a game to a game now that personally I believe is more entertaining and more enjoyable to watch, at least, excuse me, than the men's field lacrosse. Faster, more fluid. It's a great game. In Canada, just like there is in box, there are age group nationals for provincial teams throughout the country. There is an outstanding national team program in women's field lacrosse. In fact, 5 years ago, Canada won the gold medal in the U18 competition. And at every world championship thus far, and there have been 10, Canada has been very well represented, finishing as high as second and never lower than fourth. And perhaps most importantly, dozens and dozens of young ladies, maybe I won't say hundreds because that might be, well, it probably is hundreds of young ladies have been given the opportunity to take their lacrosse experience and convert it into an educational experience by gaining scholarships of one type or another to university programs in the United States where they can continue their lacrosse careers and at the same time gain an education, plus a tremendous amount of life experience. So there you are. How did we do? 5 minutes exactly. Not bad. I wish I could take 40 years of my life and just push it down to 5 minutes, but it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Anyway, so now without any further ado, I want to introduce, I mentioned a very, very outstanding group of people we have on our panel. And I noticed actually that for all of these national championships, every one of our members has been on every one of those national teams. So every team has been represented by somebody on our panel, which speaks very highly of our panelists. So first of all, from Burnaby, BC, beautiful Burnaby, BC, City of Champions, which happens to be where I come from. She was on 14 national championship teams, 3 in box and 11 in field as both a player and coach. Represented Canada at 5 World Cups, 3 as a player and 2 as a coach. And in 2020, was inducted into the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame, Michelle Boyer.
Howdy.
From Curtis, Ontario, which for you geographically uninclined people, which I actually Googled it to find out where it was. I think it's a fancy term for suburban Oshawa. Anyway, calling in from Curtis, Ontario. She's been on 3 national championship field lacrosse teams. She's coached 9 national championship box lacrosse teams and is a member of both the Ontario Lacrosse Hall of Fame and the Whitby Sports Hall of Fame. Torianne Santos.
Hello.
Oh. Calling from beautiful, somewhat beautiful, Baltimore, Maryland. A 2-time first-team All-American playing for the University of Maryland. A collegiate midfielder of the year, and has represented Canada at 4 World Championships, a U18 championship, and 3 Senior World Championships. Dana Doby.
Hi, everyone.
And finally, our resident, is she a millennial or an ex? I'm not sure what she is. She's young anyway. from New Westminster, BC, a member of both Team BC box and field teams and captain of both, and is recently committed to the University of Denver for the 2021 season. A very exciting time for her, Lauren Black.
Hi.
Now, probably like most males that play lacrosse, everybody in our panel started out playing box lacrosse. So that's where we're going to start with our question period. So first question, a simple one, and we're going to go around the horn and get everybody's response to this. And if we have anybody who wants to feed in, just as I said earlier, raise your hand and we'll get to you. But first of all, I'm interested in, how did you first get involved in playing box lacrosse? I know certainly back many years ago, it wasn't considered the sport for girls to play. So start with Michelle. Michelle?
Well, I started out as a charter member in my hometown of Port Coquitlam, just down the highway. Just a high school friend said, hey, they're starting this women's team. I guess it was a bantam team at that time. And so I went out, checked it out. They were playing in a regular league that I had no idea was even happening. And yeah, I just absolutely fell in love with the sport pretty much right from the get-go.
And what was it particularly that attracted you to lacrosse? Anything in particular?
Well, even though I'm not exactly big in stature, I actually really like the full contact. I never had the opportunity to play ice hockey at that point in my life, so donning equipment and going out and being able to actually hit people, I actually thought it was pretty cool. And I realized that when you're in a suit of armor, people can hit you, you don't get hurt. I like just the intensity of the sport and just the camaraderie. It hooked me, like I said, almost right off the bat. And obviously it stuck. And yeah, I went out to play many, many years after that initial introduction.
And I'll just kind of interject this briefly, just for further on the kind of not really the history of the game, but about the game. Women's box lacrosse is absolutely the same rules as boys box lacrosse, boys or men's box lacrosse. Same contact, same rules. I know there are some sports where the rules are altered a little bit to reduce the contact for women's versions, which I find quite frankly insulting to women. But anyway, but lacrosse, box lacrosse, full contact, no different than what you'd see in professional lacrosse leagues or senior lacrosse leagues or whatever. So Tryanne, your turn.
Well, my mom put me into gymnastics and Girl Guides, and we all quickly knew that wasn't going to be the path I was going to take. So they asked me what I wanted to do, and I wanted to play lacrosse like my brother and my dad. So they signed me up to play for the Whitby Warriors. There's no girls box at the time. So I played for the Pee Wee boys team. So I went out and tried out for that team. And that's how I started.
And anything particular that attracted you to the game?
First of all, I wanted to be better than my brother at it. So that was a big pushing force for me. But I love the intensity of it. I think that was why I didn't do well in the other things my parents put me in. But I love the intensity, the speed, and I just fell in love with the sport.
And with all due respect to Shade, you mission accomplished. uh, and Dana, growing up in the metropolis of Fergus, I believe. What?
Yeah,
how did
that's
you-
right.
how did you
Yeah.
get there?
Yeah, I think when you're walking around the community of Fergus, if you're not playing lacrosse, I'm not sure what you're up to. But like Troyan, I really wanted to follow in my brother's footsteps, and I was definitely his shadow, following him wherever he went. And I was 4 years old, and my mom was a big time softball player, and my dad was a huge lacrosse advocate. So they signed me up for both of those, t-ball, box lacrosse for the Fergus Peanut League there. And then they had the neutral sport in there, soccer. So at the end of that summer, it was like, all right, Dana, what's going to be your sport for next summer? And it was, it wasn't a question at all. Everyone knew what I was going to be picking. So from then on out, I was playing for the Fergus Minor Thistles on the boys team until I was introduced to women's field down the road.
Excellent choice. You made a wise choice. Just out of interest, I guess this is both to Troy and to Dana. What was it like playing with the guys? I guess it was only when you were really young, but
I'll step in first. I guess for me, I didn't know anything different. I was 4 years old and I just wanted to play lacrosse because I love the sport so much. So I wasn't going into the locker room thinking, why doesn't anyone else look like me? Because at that age, does it really matter? It was just more about I loved to compete. I loved the sport. I loved how it was, there's nothing else like lacrosse out there that I was playing. And you can take backyard lacrosse right onto the floor. So it was a perfect sport for me.
Yeah, and I was the same with as Dana. I didn't really notice that I was the only girl that was playing. And at the time when I started, I was big for my age. So I was faster, stronger, bigger than everybody. So at Pee Wee, and it didn't matter. It wasn't until I got to until Bantam Midget and in intermediate that, then I said, well, maybe I'm not as big and strong as I thought. But at the time, I didn't really know. And all I knew is I wanted to play lacrosse, and that was my only avenue. So it was my only choice, too.
Lauren, how about you? I pretty safe bet how you got into lacrosse, knowing your family lineage, but everybody else doesn't know that. So
Yeah, my dad played all his life, and so did my grandpa. So basically, I was born into a lacrosse family. So I was playing by the age of 3, 4, just like holding a stick in my hand, and then played for the New Westminster Salmon Bellies since mini tyke. And yeah, I just fell in love with the sport, fell in love with all my teammates, like the relationships we created from mini tyke to still right now is something really special that I didn't find the same just like small community in other sports.
yeah, and just because Dad and Grandpa were great players doesn't always mean you're going to like the game. Obviously, you did and excelled. So, what was it about the game that really hooked you? I guess.
At the beginning, I think I was a little nervous about the game. I was a pretty small girl when I was younger, and I remember I wasn't very good at catching or passing, and I would go to the box with my grandpa, and he would say, "You have to throw it at your teammate's face for them to catch it." And so he would throw it at my head over and over till I learned to catch. And then after a while, we started bringing a helmet, so I wouldn't leave crying, but he helped me really develop in my game. And I think after actually being able to pass and catch, the sport becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the beauties of lacrosse is you can practice everything by yourself.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need another person. Did any of your parents, now obviously listening to how you got into it, I don't think any of the parents had adverse thoughts about you playing such a physical sport. Did anybody have parental kind of question marks? Aha, I thought so.
Not so much my dad, because my dad, he was, whatever he wanted to play, he was really supportive, both because I have two brothers and a sister. My sister also played lacrosse and played for Canada and a million other sports. But my mom was she was a little concerned when I started playing, and she came out and watched a few of my games, and I think she watched them like this, she thought I was getting killed. And my brothers loved it, loved seeing their petite little sister out there just rocking and socking it out there. But yeah, my mom, she was a little uneasy about the whole idea. She was happy when I got into field lacrosse.
Understandable. Well, for what it's worth, I don't think my mother ever saw me play. She was petrified, was afraid, never saw me play in all the years that I played. So, Dad, not so much. Now, most of you, well, other than Lauren, you've all probably done with your box lacrosse playing career at a real competitive level. And I'm just interested in knowing a couple of highlights. I mean, you played box for a number of years at various levels, national levels and whatnot. What are a couple of highlights of your box playing career? Michelle?
Oh, geez. I got to go back into memory banks, but when I transitioned from playing in my hometown to Burnaby, that's when I was fortunate enough to meet you, Dave, and have you coach. And we did a lot of traveling because we were going to national championships, because you coached us so well, and we were successful. So I think some of the trips that we did when we, junkets off to Nova Scotia, and we did a trip to Montreal, and just things like that, like with your team. It's one thing to be, at home and everybody leaves after a game, but you're on the road together, and you really get to know people. And we're young, some younger than others. Some people get homesick, and you'd have to kind of create a buddy system so everybody, was not crying or something because they weren't at home. But those are probably some of the most memorable things. And now with people that I played with, we can just get into hysterics talking about some of the shenanigans we got up to when we were on these trips. So probably those are the best memories I had.
Troy?
We won a Bantam A championship with the Whitby Warriors. But unfortunately, like the girls today, I didn't have anywhere else to go in my box career. So like I said, I played Bantam Midget, and we graduated from Midget. Everyone on our team got a letter to come out to play for the Whitby Warriors Junior A program, except for me. So I knew that, well, first of all, it wasn't the greatest, but I knew that my lacrosse career in box lacrosse with the boys was over. So we started an intermediate team in Whitby so that I could play one more year. Yeah, I had a lot of good memories and a lot of fun times in those years. A lot of friends that I still have, some of those guy friends from playing back then.
Dana?
The Fergus Thistles, we didn't have too much success when it came to provincials, so I don't have too many championship highlights in that way, but just the entire summer. My family, we had a tent trailer, so as we would go to tournaments, we'd be camping with the rest of our team, and we'd be running around, jumping in the lake, riding our bikes, and then, playing 2 or 3 games on a Saturday, and hopefully making it to the playoffs and the championships on the Sunday. So I really think my box highlight was just the entire summer with my family and my friends running around playing and having a great time and getting those sock tans that we all know so much about. But the biggest highlight I would have to say, Dave, is yet to come. We're working so hard to create a women's box world championship. And, I know retirement for me is definitely around the corner, but that would be the biggest highlight for me, would be able to play in that or coach in that or be a part of that program and that experience.
As it would, and I hope that happens. Lauren, your highlights are probably yet to come too, but so far you've still played a lot of box lacrosse.
Yeah, I've played in 4 Canadian national championships, all against Ontario. And just last year, so for the first 3 years, we came home with silver every time. And then this past year, not last year, in 2019, we played, and the tournament was here in BC, and we ended up getting gold in that game. And so I think after those 3 years of getting silver every time, being able to get gold, especially I was last year midget, so that's after midget, that's when you're done for nationals. So being able to get that gold for my last year is probably my best memory for box.
Well, you've probably got tons more coming, and I think sometimes, winning after you've lost 2 or 3 times is a heck of a lot sweeter than it is maybe when you just win right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to bring in the details of that, Lauren. I had the unfortunate to be on the losing end of that, but at least we had the 3 before, so that was okay.
It's still it's 3-1 and counting, so there you go. Now, after box, well, not after, sometimes during box career, then the introduction of field lacrosse. As I said, there was no field lacrosse in Canada until 1982, 83. So it's really a relatively new game. So I'm very interested in knowing, because you all obviously are in different generations, so to speak. So I'm interested in knowing, first of all, how you were introduced to field lacrosse, and secondly, what the transition was like, because it must have been difficult, interesting, fun, whatever. So Michelle, go ahead.
Oh, difficult, interesting, sometimes fun. Well, of course, as you talked about in the history, we were all box lacrosse players, and they mashed up East and West, and we started trying out our field lacrosse skills down south of the border. And I remember going to Stanford University. We were playing at the Western States tournament. We didn't even have field lacrosse sticks, and so we got like PE issue sticks that had no pocket in them. And I think probably after the first time I used that thing, I sailed it into a tree or something, because I thought, this is the stupidest thing ever. I'm playing box across 1 minute with this big loopy pocket and doing all these cool slick things that you do in box, and suddenly I'm playing field with this tennis racket trying to cradle this ball. So that was a little rough, but with some coaching, with some really good coaching, and of course when we put together a national side and went off to world championships, pretty much had it dialed in by then. But we just figured, well, what we don't know, what we can't do in field lacrosse, we'll make up for it, and just by being the fittest team at world championships. So wasn't a lot of finesse, wasn't a lot of skill, but we ran circles around other teams, and we managed to come in third, basically with the whole world going, who the heck are these people anyway? So that part was fun.
Troy?
The transition was good. The first time I played, I felt like it was freeing. I had no helmet to wear. I didn't have any protective gear to weigh me down. I had this huge open space to play with, and I felt like it was just like freedom. I did hate 2 parts of it. The one was the stick. I didn't understand it, like Michelle, how we had to go from such a an easy stick to catch with to such a difficult one. So I was always trying to punch a pocket in my stick and always trying to find ways to cheat and stick my heel in the back of it to make the pocket bigger. But the worst part was having to wear a skirt. And I remember my mom told me that you can go and play field lacrosse, but just so prepared, you're gonna have to wear a skirt. And that was almost the end of I didn't even start the game of field lacrosse, but they forced me to go and play. And it's funny because when I try to transition girls from box to field now, it's the same reaction. I'm not wearing that stupid skirt.
Well, fashion is everything. I just remember the ones, Michelle, that you guys wore in England. We borrowed them from somebody, and they must have weighed like 40 pounds each.
They were kilts, like
yeah,
full on wool
kilts.
kilts, and you had to have matching bloomers underneath. That was part of the rules of the game. It was just ridiculous.
Yes, knickers had to punch your kilt. So Dana, follow that.
Thing is, everyone will be happy to know that collegiate lacrosse and professional lacrosse, you don't actually have to wear a skirt anymore. So times are changing. So girls out there, don't you worry if you want to switch over to field lacrosse. My introduction to field lacrosse was such a unique one. The parents on the call will understand this, but the young kids watching won't. I actually got a fax machine message to the Allura Arena kind of asking if there are any girls in our zone that played box lacrosse that would be interested in trying out for the Canadian U19 national program. So one of my dad's buddies, gave him the fax and was like, you got to get Dana to try out. So I actually purchased my first ever women's lacrosse stick from Troy Ann in preparation of that tryout. So girlfriend down there actually sold me one of those tennis rackets that she hated so much. And I showed up to that tryout. And I love a challenge. It was definitely frustrating as a lacrosse player to switch your stick and to see the difference in the pocket. But for me, I looked at that as such a great opportunity, and girls at that stage in Canada lacrosse weren't throwing behind the backs or around the world or doing stick tricks with their sticks because they were saying they were so limited. So I wanted to make sure that I could kind of change that and hopefully change the game for Canada lacrosse and be innovative within my style and continue to push the envelope of women's field lacrosse, even though it looks so different. Unfortunately, I got cut from that U19 Canadian national team, and I was 13 years old, and I was pissed off until the next U19 came out, and I made sure to make that team. But I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me, just to show the opportunity that lacrosse had in my future, whether that was representing Canada or earning a scholarship down in the US to have that great chance of playing and getting an education as well. So pretty unique. And I just love the fact that Troy Ann sold me my first stick and here we are on this panel together today.
Michelle, did you have your hand up?
Oh, I was just going to echo something Dana said about, how we got pretty proficient at using those tennis rackets as sticks. And at the first World Championship, I remember one of the English players, after we beat the host country, which probably was not, good, I don't know, visitor guest protocol or anything, but we did beat them. And the one English player came up to me after the game and she commented that we passed the ball to each other harder than they took shots on net. She said, I don't know how you do that with that stick.
Oh, Laura, you're sort of transitioning every few months because you're playing, I guess, both box and field. So that's got to be tricky going from box to field, in one in the spring, one in the fall.
I would say it definitely gets easier, like transitioning. It just takes a couple hard passes to get used to whichever stick you're switching to. But in the beginning, before I even knew what field lacrosse was, I was sitting in the dressing room after a box game, and two of my teammates were talking about how they just played up for their older sisters' field lacrosse teams, and I didn't even know what that was. And they were saying, it's so weird, you can't even hit anyone. The lacrosse sticks are like tennis rackets, and I was so confused. I was like, that's not lacrosse. Like, what are you even playing? And then I went out to a camp, and the first time I tried to throw a ball, it just went straight to the sky. And I was like so confused, but after a while, you kind of learn. I was watching the older girls play pass regularly, and I was like, how are they doing that with those sticks? And so it took a little while to actually get used to it, to get used to the rules of the game before I really, really started to enjoy it.
Yeah, there always is that
Just
transition
say,
phase.
I would just say, Dave, that's the biggest difference I think now compared to when Michelle started, Troyanne and myself started is, I mean, you can pick up a women's field lacrosse stick and you can rock it right now. The
Yeah.
technology, the change, the way the pockets are, you know, it's not like what it used to be. I even think a lot of players could probably use their field stick in a box game and be fine with it, especially if you're using one of those gate lacrosse sticks. So I'll add that plug in for those guys as well.
Got one right behind me.
Well, actually, we remember, Michelle, we started out, we had the wooden ones.
Yes.
Those were, I mean, literally like tennis rackets. So
Yep.
yeah, the technology, I mean, technology in all sports has changed the world so much. But yeah, you're right. I've just looked at sticks. I have a granddaughter that I'm trying to push to the proper side of the tracks and get her playing lacrosse and looking at sticks. And yeah, you're right. I think you probably could play box with them as well. Now, Dana mentioned something, a very important point about the opportunity that she had to go down to the States and play collegiately. And I guess everybody, all here, everybody here on the panel except Michelle did get that opportunity to go down, or is getting the opportunity in Lauren's case, to go down and play collegiately in the States. And I'm sure there are a lot of parents, kids, potentially looking at those opportunities that would be interested in knowing what the process is to go to get that accomplished. I mean, obviously, practice, practice, practice. Like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Same thing. But in terms of the paperwork and whatnot, the visibility factor, all that sort of thing, and the whole recruiting interest. What was it like for you guys? So, Troyanne, I'll start with you. What was it like with you when you went down to the States originally?
Well, I'm going to leave most of the technical stuff to Dana on what recruiting is like now. But for myself, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, the only other woman before me to get a scholarship was Gail Cummings, and she was a teammate of mine with Team Ontario, and she went to Temple. I knew that was the way I wanted to go down, but we didn't have recruiting tournaments here. American coaches didn't look across the border for Canadian lacrosse players. It wasn't that sort of thing. So my dad had sent me to a camp in Detroit that Sue Stahl, the current, at that time, the current U.S. head coach, was doing a camp. And I had 3 days to impress this lady so that she could write me a recommendation letter. And that's all I did. I worked as hard as I could for 3 days, knew this was my only chance. And that letter was my ticket for a scholarship, like how different things are now. So I basically sent that application in with this recommendation letter from the U.S. head coach, and it was good enough to get me 5 offers. And things have obviously changed. Like I mean, think of how long ago that was, and being the second girl in Canada to have that opportunity, and to just see these floodgates of open up for these other girls to have the chance to do this. But yeah, today's world now, obviously Dana can talk more about that with her coaching. But yeah, it was a lot different back then, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, to add to what Troy said, I think we had about the same time as you went down, a girl from BC by the name of Carol Taylor went down to Penn State and played down at Penn State, won a national championship there, as Gail did at Temple. But all we did with her, we sent a bunch of videos. Took a whole bunch of video of her doing drills, practicing shooting, sent them all off, and she got a scholarship based on that. So, like you say, times have changed. So, Dana, you're up. You're sort of the expert on this thing. I don't want you to get yourself in trouble by stepping in the NCAA rules, but I guess more your process of being recruited and ending up down, well, eventually at Maryland.
Yeah, so my recruiting process really started when I was trying to for my second chance of making this U19 national team, and part of our tryout campaign was to play at some tournaments down in the U.S. And that's where I got a couple looks from some college coaches, just at their showcase lacrosse camps and clinics going on 12 months out of the year. Like, it really is a religion in North America, and specifically when it comes to collegiate lacrosse here in the US, lacrosse is going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you're someone that is definitely interested in having that opportunity to earn a scholarship, whether that's academic or an athletic scholarship, and having the chance to maybe combo the two of those to get down here and play, you know, the opportunities are endless. And I think we have above 300 universities, colleges, and programs in 3 different divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3. So there really is a place for everyone who's interested in playing and furthering their lacrosse college career. And I would say something that's just so interesting, in our last senior world championship, every single one of us actually played collegiate lacrosse in the US. Just by having that daily practice grind, 2 hours a day, 6 days a week, conditioning, lifting, there's really, it's such a unique experience, and a really close feeling to being a professional athlete in the sport of lacrosse that you can get at that young of an age. So I actually followed some of my Canadian teammates to Ohio University. They told their coach, hey, check out this kid, she's pretty good. Got one phone call on September 1st, and I said, absolutely take it. I would love to play lacrosse at Ohio. And then ended up transferring in my 3rd year of university, my junior year, to play for my dream school, the University of Maryland, for Kathy Reese and Jen Adams, where I graduated there in 2009. So I took definitely a different path, but it was such an unbelievable experience, and one I definitely wouldn't change.
Lauren, you're the most recent recruitee. I guess that's a word. It is now. So what was your process in making yourself visible and whatnot?
Yeah, I think these days we have a lot more of an opportunity, especially playing on Team BC. We get to go to recruiting tournaments and camps and stuff. So basically just getting down to the States and getting to play with the American girls is definitely a very different experience than playing here. And playing in front of college coaches, definitely very nerve-wracking, but just getting down there and getting to play in front of coaches. And then these days there's so many more connections now and stuff. So I basically just got recruited based off of getting able to play down in the States and having some really good coaches.
I'm just going to ask all 3 of you now, just very, very quickly, one key. If you're going to tell a parent or a potential player that's maybe 14, 15 at the junior high school level, something like that, that is interested or perhaps potentially able to get a scholarship, one key to getting a scholarship. Troy?
I guess just to be seen, to get your highlight tapes done and make those contacts with college coaches. Yeah, I think that's the easiest thing to do right now. And definitely keep your grades up. So it's just so much easier for college coaches to recruit lacrosse players or any kind of athlete when they're good student athletes. So is an important factor. So it's not just always about your skill in lacrosse, but it could be the deciding factor of how much you're going to be compensated for your scholarship and stuff based on your grade. So make sure you keep that up.
Anna?
I think you honestly have to be a special player. You can't be just your average kid that likes playing lacrosse. It has to be something you love, something that you're passionate about, and something that you're willing to put in a lot more effort than maybe some of your teammates, especially being an international player looking to get recruited. There has to be something special about you, whether that's your speed, your athleticism, your stick work, your IQ. If you can have that total package, your opportunities are going to be wide open. But it's also too, like Troyan said, grades are so important, but then finding the right school for you and the lacrosse program that you think you'd be able to fit right in. So.
Okay, and Lauren, one suggestion or hint if you're talking to a kid tomorrow?
I would just say hard work. Like, there's a lot of really talented players out there, but if you're willing to put in the extra work on and off the field, I think that's something that can just set you apart from just a player who just shows up to practice, heads home.
Now, for some of you, your field career is still ongoing. Others, it's maybe in the rearview mirror. What's a couple of highlights of your field career? We talked about your box career. What about the field career? I mean, you've all played interprovincially. You've all played on the national team at some level, whether it's U18 or the senior team, and two and a half of you have played at the collegiate level. We'll give Lauren a half a shot at the collegiate level. What's your highlight, Michelle?
Well, two things come to mind, and the first one, it was definitely, you mentioned Paul Gilkinson a while back, and I have to thank him. Pre-82 World Cup, myself and one other player from BC got an invite to go out, join Team Ontario, and head south to national championship in the US that was being played in Washington, DC. And I remember the first morning driving up to these fields, and you have to keep in mind, I mean, we just didn't have any field lacrosse here to speak of, a little bit of box lacrosse. And we show up at these fields, and it's where those reflection pools are and the big monument. And I just saw field after field after field of girls playing lacrosse. And I was completely blown away. I had no idea that lacrosse was played that extensively in the States. So that definitely just, it inspired me so much. And then going to the first world championship, being scared to death, literally the night before, scared to death, not knowing what we're getting into, and coming out on that field wearing Team Canada colors, bagpipes playing, marching on the field with my teammates. It was like the coolest thing ever. And yeah, those two things, if I think of it, there's so many memories, but those two things really stand out.
Fran?
Yeah, representing my country was definitely a highlight, and I still get goosebumps listening to the national anthem, and it's something that will always stay with me. It can never be taken away. I think my biggest memories and good times and highlights would have to be just my time with my teammates. So the travel times, the experiences, the laughs we've had. So many of them are still my best friends, and that's invaluable to me. But I like being able to travel to Japan and Australia and England and Vail and so many places I may never have had the opportunity to go to. Has just been such a great thing that I've wanted to pass that on to my kids, and hopefully that they'll have their opportunity to do the same thing. So yeah, mostly with my teammates for sure.
And Dana?
Just to agree with Michelle and Troyanne, putting that Canada jersey on is definitely the biggest highlight. It's something as a kid, you're watching the Olympics as a little kid, and you're like, oh, what it would mean to me to represent my country in the sport that I love, whether that's, you're a big hockey player or lacrosse player, no matter what it is, that's your biggest dream. So to have that dream come true, and for us on here multiple times, is a surreal experience, and one I'll never take for granted. Been fortunate to play in some really big games, especially at the World Championship, and make our way to the gold medal game and win some silvers and some bronze, never a gold. So that's what kind of keeps you plugging away. And then again, a huge highlight was just to make it to my dream school at the University of Maryland, and to be the first Canadian to do so. And then to see Erica Evans follow in those footsteps and win a national championship a couple years later for Maryland was also a huge highlight. But just like the box lacrosse, I hope the highlight's still yet to come, because I would love one of those gold medals.
Wouldn't we all? And well, Lauren, I'm sure most of your highlights are, we could do this 10 years from now and be asking you this question, but there's got to be some highlights now, even at your age.
Yeah, playing in the field Canadian National Championships back in 2019 was definitely probably one of the most special teams I've played on. Every single one of us were just best friends, and even though we didn't get the gold, I think sitting in the dorms on a really hot summer day with our little fans is all that was cooling us off, and just being there with each other for those 10 days. is something that's probably my favorite field memory so far. And then being able to play in a bit of a world tournament, playing against England was really, really cool for all of us. So yeah, those are probably my favorites.
Now, as you were growing up playing box and field, and then, morphing into field, I'm just interested, were there any particular players that you looked up and admired, coaches, I guess, that had a particular effect on you, positive or negative? Well, we'll leave the negative ones out. I guess that wouldn't be very politically correct, would it? But I'm thinking more people who mentored you or inspirations to you, box and field. Michelle, sorry, go ahead.
Well, box lacrosse, I mean, primarily played it in Burnaby under you, of course, and what was really cool is Dave coached us many years as the Kirby Clipettes, and he used to bring out some of his Vancouver Burrard players. I don't know if you were like semi-pro then or what you were, but anyway, we used to go out and watch Dave play and that all the time, and so to have those big stars of the game, the face-off specialists, the defensive guys, they came out. It was really nice of them to just bring those tips and tricks for us to learn from them, and then to have, I said something about throwing you under the bus. Dave, quite the opposite. Dave was, I always tell people, he's way ahead of his time in terms of the coaching, the level of the coaching that we got from him. He threw kinesiology stuff at us, long before anybody even knew what plyometrics were. We're doing crazy stuff and hopping and bounding, and he just took our level of play as a group of athletes, and just we just went way beyond any limits. Personally, I would have ever imagined it would have reached, and teammates as well. And yeah, so definitely. And then after Dave, there were a couple of American coaches that coached us in field lacrosse. Really great experiences, and really people I looked up to and learned so much from. Courtney Solenberger at the first World Championship in '82 was a phenomenal coach, bigger than life. And then Libby Williams coached us in the '86 World Cup in Philly. And she, if anybody remembers Libby Williams, she was tough, but boy, she knew her stuff, and just learned a tremendous amount from her. So yeah, great coaching, and players, mostly male players, because that was the era I came from.
Troyanne?
I didn't have any really idols that I grew up following, but I'd say it was my teammates. I played with a lot of great players, and those are the people that I looked up to. I had the opportunity to either play against them or play with Gail Cummings and Michelle Boyer right there, and Carrie Hartle, Jen Johnson. There's so many, teammates of mine that I looked up to, and like everything I did, every time I trained and every time I worked out and every time I practiced, I did it for them. I wanted to gain their respect and admiration, and I definitely looked up to those guys for sure. I did have one player that played for the U.S. I played against her for 4 years. She went to UVA, and I had to line up against her every year. And then 2 World Cups I had to line up against her. And she was a defensive player. I was an attack player, and she scored more goals than I did in every single one of those games. And she's in the Hall of Fame. Her name's Sherry Greer, and she's world-class athlete. And I wouldn't say I looked up to her, but I definitely admired her, and I dreaded her, and but there's a lot of great players, and like I said, most of them I feel like I played with a lot of those players, so I was very fortunate to have that.
Dana?
Yeah, growing up, box lacrosse was definitely the Gate brothers. I remember taking the bus trip from Fergus down to the Buffalo games, and getting to be out on the floor before and after and get the autographs. That was incredible. I wish I would have had some female lacrosse role models at that age, but unfortunately, like Michelle, we just didn't have that. And then going into field lacrosse, I remember in like 2002, we did a combo training camp with our junior team and our senior team. And it was just like we were all so starstruck going to the cafeteria, and the senior players were there, and we would try to like find ways to have conversations with them. I can also remember like taking photos of them training, and us just being like so over the moon getting to meet them. And players like Troyanne, Lynn's Hart was a huge one for me. I absolutely loved her. Jen Johnson, she was just like, one of the best players I'd ever seen play women's field lacrosse at that point. And then from an international perspective, once I kind of started playing at World Championships and getting to see women's world lacrosse globally, is Jen Adams, hands down. She was the greatest of all time, and everything you want to be as an athlete and a teammate and a player. I think Jen kind of really showcased what that was at one of the best levels. So teammate wise, I got so many. I don't even want to start naming them off in case I forget anybody. But that's just like when you play a sport, especially lacrosse, the community and the family atmosphere. Troyanne touched on it, but this goes far beyond actual playing of lacrosse. It's being each other's weddings, it's being kids' godparents, and it's being called auntie when you're not even their aunt. It's something that makes lacrosse just so special.
Lauren?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to actually have a lot of female role models, especially growing up. Selena Lasota is someone who's coached me before, and I've watched her play. She's just someone who I completely look up to. She's just an insane lacrosse player. When I was younger, and I think still now, definitely my dad and my grandpa are some people who I really look up to. With my dad, he's coached me all of my life, so we've definitely had a lot of memories together and things that I'm really fortunate that lacrosse gave us. But just my teammates as well, I definitely are people who I look up to and want to be like them. But yeah, I've got a lot of women's lacrosse players to look up to.
Now we've kind of talked about the past, a little bit about the present, and I think we're going to spend the last 10 or 15 minutes or so of our time talking about the future, because I think that's perhaps the most important thing for women's lacrosse. Even with my pathetic little history lesson at the start of this session, you can see that the game has developed tremendously. And then hearing the experiences of our panelists, that the game has developed tremendously over the last probably 20 years, where it's really taken off like crazy, just in Canada and around the world. So what I want to find out now is that, because spoiler alert here, all the girls are still involved in the game in some way. And I'd like to know now, what are you guys doing now? Because I know you're doing things at the world level, at the provincial level, training level, all sorts of stuff. So Michelle, go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. I right now am working on a project for World Lacrosse with Dana Dobie as well. And it's a working group put together by World Lacrosse to develop a competitive pathway for girls and women's box lacrosse to get to that international level. So what would that competitive stream look like, and what are the barriers we're facing to get the women's box game to that level, to increase participation around the world? So it's a 2-year project for now, and that's the window of time we have. And we're about 8 months in. Is that right, Dana? So we did a survey of lacrosse athletes worldwide, had some success with that, NGBs throughout the world. So 53, I think, national governing bodies responded to our survey. We have a really clear indication moving forward that there's girls in 40 countries out there that responded and said, yes, we want to play box lacrosse, and we want to play full box lacrosse just like the guys play. So it's inspiring. It's what I get jazzed about every day, and this game has just it's just been pervasive in my life, and now I get to be a part of the future of box lacrosse and the future of lacrosse in general, and see girls that can realize a dream. playing at an international level in the great sport of box lacrosse. So I'm really excited about the overall project in making those things happen.
And Troyan, I know you've got a whole bunch of things going on. You're working with Ontario, you're working with Team US, you've got a business going with lacrosse. Fill us in.
Yeah, I seem to touch all aspects of the game. So I'm still helping coach my son in I guess he'll be midget next year in box in Oshawa. I just finished a great coaching career with Team Ontario. I had the fortunate experience to be able to coach with Ontario for I think we tried to figure it out. Bob McMahon and I think we coached in 14 national championships together with Team Ontario. And then I'm currently the director for the women's program for Edge Lacrosse for women's field lacrosse, and working with the Toronto Rock women's field lacrosse program there. And one of my favorites is now working with US Boxla, which is a company that my brother is co-founder of, and he has a daughter, my niece, who's an amazing player, Taylor Santos, that is going in the making that box lacrosse transition. She plays field and box and help develop their women's program there. And they're doing a great job with. I know it's US Boxla, but if it gets girls playing, and I'm all for it. So I'm kind of working with my brother, doing camps and clinics, and they have US Nationals, and they just had their very first all girls box lacrosse tournament in the US a couple weekends ago in San Diego, which is a huge milestone, and just really happy to be a part of that.
That's fantastic. I know your brother's done a lot of stuff down in Southern California or Northern California, pardon me, and now branching out to the US. And like you said, who cares what country it is as long as the game's growing. Dana, I know you've got a ton of stuff going on, so fill us in.
Yeah, if you would have told my 4-year-old self that I'd be able to coach and play lacrosse for a living, I would have been like, you're kidding me. This is what my dad does for volunteer, more hours than he does for his actual job. So I'm super, super lucky that, lacrosse has been a vehicle in so many different directions in my life. So I coach professionally with Loyola University in Baltimore, Maryland, in my 14th season there, coaching the Hounds. Just get to coach lacrosse every single day is unbelievable. With that, I'm co-director of a lacrosse company called 7 Lacrosse Training, where it's position-specific clinics and camps and things like that, as well as I've played 3 years professionally. Hopefully might be able to squeeze a 4th in there. I'm not quite sure. And then I'm a part of the World Lacrosse Athletes Commission as vice chair, just trying to create equal opportunity for girls and women to play the sport of lacrosse, whether that's field or box. And then lastly, just a part of a Blue Skies organization that's looking to get lacrosse into the Olympics in a discipline called 6v6 lacrosse, which is a hybrid of field and box lacrosse. So in order for our sport to grow, it needs to be played on the biggest stage across the world, and that is absolutely the Olympics. So that's kind of where I see the future of our sport is played, on the biggest stage, and lacrosse players are getting Olympic medals around their necks, and it would be incredible to see what happens to lacrosse after that.
Well, you got to quit sitting around and start getting busy. You got to get one of those 25-hour days going. Lauren, you've got a unique situation. You're off to college in, I guess, August. You'll probably be heading down there. And the nasty COVID bug has just messed everything up. So what are you doing in terms of training?
Right now, basically everything is shut down sports-wise. So a lot of everything's mostly on your own, which is tough, especially conditioning-wise, because basically the only thing that makes conditioning fun for me anyways is doing it with my teammates. So that's sort of been a bit of a challenge, just doing that on my own. But also I'm just playing pass with my dad in the backyard basically every day, which is sort of what we've been doing for my whole life, but still getting a lot of chances to do that, which if I was in regular season, I might not be able to have gotten to do that as much as I am right now. So I'm pretty happy about that. But mostly it's just been by myself, which is a little bit different than what it would normally be the couple months before I'm heading out. But things are getting better, so hopefully practices can start up again. Or we're still practicing, but we're not having any games yet, but hopefully soon that can happen.
Is there any communication with the coaches at Colorado, or like Zoom calls or any of that sort of stuff, or is that on hold until you get there?
Not Zoom calls right now. I talked to them a fair bit, but they're all in conference play and getting to the end of their season. So a lot of these coaches, as Dana probably knows, are getting really busy and having a lot to do with their team. So I think that's a lot of what they're focusing on right now. I talk to the girls in my class all the time, the girls who are heading out this summer all the time, and I'm definitely in communication with my coaches, which has been really nice. So
Now we're into overtime, and I don't know. I know when I played, I always thought overtime was the most fun. So we're going to keep going. We got the green light to keep going for a few minutes anyway. And just got a couple more things I want to touch on. Very philosophical questions now. Once again, we're talking about the future of lacrosse, and you've kind of alluded to your thoughts about the future of lacrosse. So I'd like to know, just in reasonably short terms, what is your personal vision for the future of the sport of lacrosse, box or field or both? And what would you suggest, or what is one suggestion that you have to perhaps attain that vision, to make that vision come to fruition? Michelle?
Well, I think I'll focus on the box end of it because that's what I'm working on, and that's what I'm most passionate about right now. I mean, I want to see the game grow, whether it's box, field, or 6v6. But I would really, well, I'm working hard. Dean is working hard. We're all working hard to get the girls and women playing that box game throughout the world. And there's lots of guys that have had those opportunities, and they've just come so easily to them from right when they're little to pro level. And I talked to a 10-year-old kid at a practice a while back in Burnaby, and she was about up to my chin and 10 years old. And I said, well, what do you want to be here, in terms of your lacrosse career? And she said, I want to play pro lacrosse. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? We're going to get you playing pro lacrosse, hopefully on a women's team, but 10 years down the road, or I'm going to die trying, I'll tell you. So that's my vision, is for girls that age to be able to dream that dream and it become a reality.
Brian?
My vision is to get girls lacrosse the recognition that they deserve. And I want people in Canada to start thinking, when they say the word lacrosse, I want it to incorporate and encompass women in that. It doesn't necessarily have to be men's lacrosse. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to think about just winning mental cups and man cups, but how important it is for these women to still win a national championship. A national championship's a national championship. It doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl. I want people to recognize how important and how valuable women in lacrosse is, and I want that to change. And I think that we have a few things to do for sure, and I want to make it one of my goals is to help that landscape change in lacrosse in Canada.
And Dana?
My vision would just be to have equal opportunity to play and compete, and to kind of piggyback off what Troy-Ann said. Lacrosse is lacrosse, and lacrosse is for everyone, and I don't think it needs to be gender specific. And I would love to be involved in conversations where that's not the case. I would love for the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame to have just as many female lacrosse players as they do have male lacrosse players within that. I think that's really my vision for women's lacrosse, for it just to be on the same playing field, and for us not to have to fight so hard to make sure that happens. And also, to go along with that, I would love to see more moms coaching and more moms officiating. and more moms playing the sport of lacrosse. I know it's so hard once you get to that age and that position within your family, you know, you're kind of your sport and what comes for you kind of gets put on that back burner. But I would just say it's just so important for the moms out there and the aunts and people who are getting a little bit older just to stick with it. You know, the more we see it, the more we think the opportunity is out there. So having this panel is such a great step forward. But like the other women on this call, I just want to, you know, be able to kick gender out the window and for girls like Lauren to not have to continue this conversation.
Lauren, you get the last word.
I would say everything that all these women are doing here is so incredible for the sport. I think just to see this game continue to grow, because it's just such a fun game, and I think there's a lot of people out there who don't know about lacrosse or have never played and are skeptical, but it's just such a fun game. And so I think to see it continue to grow, and like what Dana was saying, how having moms as coaches, I've grown up my whole life just having all male coaches for the most part. So I think you don't see a lot of moms on the bench. It's mostly dads. So I think when I was playing in nationals and I saw Troyanne on the bench, that was definitely really inspiring to me, because that was one of the first few times I've seen at that high level, or even just in general, like another lady on the bench rather than one of our dads. So I think it's really cool to see it keep growing for all of us. Yeah.
Well, ladies, like I said, we've gone overtime a bit. I think our goal, as I said at the start of the session, was to educate people and entertain people a little bit. And I think thanks to you guys, we have really, really done that. I mean, anybody who's been watching this who isn't a heck of a lot more informed about the past, present, and maybe more importantly, the future of women's lacrosse has been listening, because I think, girls, you've done a fantastic job. I thank you so much. I thank Laura Swan for putting this together, and we look forward to the next time we get together. Ladies, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you so much.
See you soon, ladies.
Thank you.